My cousin was considered the family star, while I was treated as the running joke. At the reunion, my aunt bragged endlessly about his new job. I simply said, I just signed his paycheck. Have you ever attended a family gathering where you could feel the setup before it even began? As if you weren't invited out of affection or for a genuine reunion, but instead to play a background role while someone else is celebrated. That was me, Ethan, 32. And this story starts with a short text from my mother that read, "Please come this time. Everyone wants to see you." I hadn't gone to a family event in 4 years. Not because I was angry or dramatic. Well, maybe a little. But mainly because those gatherings never felt like family. Each one turned into a comparison checklist. Who bought a house? Who got engaged? Who had a baby? Who landed a new job? And without fail, my Aunt Sandra would slip in a comment about how I was still figuring myself out, like I was a misplaced sock. So I kept my distance. Eventually, I focused on my own work quietly. No social media updates, no announcements, no drama. But something in my mother's voice, along with my own curiosity, pushed me to say yes this time. For the past 7 years, I had been building my company. It started as a niche hiring platform for engineers. Later, we expanded into corporate recruiting solutions. And 7 months ago, we secured a clean exit, major enough to change everything. But I kept it private. I wasn't mentioned in any headlines, which I preferred. I liked flying under the radar. The reunion was on Saturday, at the same place as always, my uncle's overly large house with the circular driveway, 3 SUVs out front, and a random iron eagle above the garage that made the place look like a secret society headquarters. I pulled up in my Tesla. No one noticed or cared. They were all gathered around Zach. Let me tell you about my cousin. Zach is 28, blonde, always smiling, full of energy in his old varsity jacket, the classic golden child. Straight A's, business degree, summer internships with big companies, the whole polished LinkedIn package. The family adored him, and apparently today was his big moment. The moment I stepped inside, Aunt Sandra grabbed my wrist. "Ethan, you're here. Come say hi to Zach. He just got hired at Nexra." I recognized the name, a finance company that recently raised capital, had flashy press coverage, a big valuation, and unknown to her, now technically not directly, but under the parent firm's umbrella. I blinked. "Oh, wow," I said, smiling. "That's great." She leaned in, whispering like it was a secret, though her voice carried across the yard. "He'll be a millionaire by 30. He's just so talented." Then came the predictable jab. "Unlike some people." She stretched out that last part like she hoped I wouldn't catch it. I smiled again, not because I wasn't annoyed, but because this was exactly the moment I came prepared for. Zach stood in the middle of the yard, surrounded by lawn chairs, lemonade, and a crowd of excited relatives. He talked about his stock options as if he had invented them himself. A circle of cousins and uncles nodded along. "It's pre-IPO, so sure, there's risk," he said. "But I'm not worried. We're scaling fast. The CEO knows me by name." I stayed near the edge of the group, hands in my pockets, just watching. That's when my grandmother asked the inevitable question. "So Ethan, honey, what are you doing these days?" The noise around us dimmed. Not completely quiet, but quiet enough that I could feel everyone turn toward me, waiting. I thought about giving my usual vague reply. Oh, you know, work's good, staying busy. But today felt different. I wasn't here to boast, but I was done letting them define me. Not much, I said, taking a sip of my drink. I just signed Zach's paycheck last week. Silence. Real silence. I'd never seen so many people freeze at once. Even Zach blinked, unsure of what he had heard. Aunt Sandra's smile tightened. Then Grandpa, 85, half deaf, usually half asleep, stood up suddenly, leaned on his cane, and said, "Wait a minute." But let me back up, because that line wasn't random. It was 7 years in the making. It started when I dropped out of college and moved into a tiny apartment above a laundromat. My family thought I was throwing my future away. When my mom cried, Aunt Sandra told everyone I would end up delivering food or joining a band. I didn't care. I had an idea and wanted to build it, not for attention, but for myself. But that choice cost me more than their approval. Standing there in the backyard, watching their confident smiles fade, I remembered all of it. The birthday party I wasn't invited to because they assumed I'd be too busy. The Thanksgiving when Zach joked that I was basically unemployed and everyone laughed, including my parents. The eye rolls, the ignored texts, the blank stares when I tried to explain what I was working on. So no, my comment wasn't bragging. It was reclaiming space. Grandpa, adjusting his hearing aid, looked from me to Zach. "You signed his paycheck? What does that mean?" Everyone stared. Again. I felt the pressure in my chest as I held my drink. I hadn't planned to say it like that. It slipped out. But now it was out there. Zach gave a nervous laugh. "Ha! Okay, Ethan. Good joke." He looked around for support. No one joined in. I smiled slightly. Yeah, small world, right? Then I let them sit with it. Aunt Sandra recovered first. She straightened her cardigan and gave me that controlled, dismissive expression she used when she wanted the upper hand. Well, I'm sure that's amusing, Ethan. But part of me wanted more. Not revenge, but balance. Something long overdue. At 23, I'd moved back home after running out of money. I worked 16-hour days building the first version of my platform, slept little, and delivered groceries at night to pay off my student loans. I ate plain rice for 6 nights straight. I used to joke with my one friend that if I ever succeeded, I'd buy a gold-plated rice cooker. The hardest part wasn't the struggle, it was the pity. Every meal felt like a quiet intervention. My mom suggested I get a stable job first, then work on my little business later. My dad grumbled at the TV. My sister Victoria, in medical school at the time, shared stories from her residency, hinting she had no time for side projects. The message was clear. Ethan is wasting his potential. Ethan needs to grow up. At Victoria's graduation, I overheard my parents whispering. My mom said, "I just hope he doesn't embarrass us." I didn't cry. I left before the speeches started. After that, I stopped showing up. I worked in silence. Back in the present, the energy in the yard had shifted. Zach kept talking, mentioning something about being added to a private Slack channel, but no one was listening. Their attention had finally moved to me. Before I could speak again, Aunt Sandra stepped in. "You know what I think, Ethan? You're jealous. You came here to cause trouble. You've always hated when someone else gets recognition." That hit hard, not because it was true, but because she said it so casually, as if that had always been my identity. "No," I replied quietly. "I came because Mom asked me to, and because I hoped, naively I guess, that this year might feel different." "Different how?" she said. "We're proud of Zach. He earned it. You don't get to show up after years and act like you're above everyone." "I'm not above anyone," I said, "but I'm not beneath you either." She didn't take that well. Really? Last I checked, you dropped out, lived off your parents, and couldn't hold a real job. Zach has a career. He's going places. And you? What have you done that's worth applauding? My neck burned. I glanced at my mother chewing her lip. My father stared at his plate. Then Victoria walked over. She must have heard the last part. You know, she said gently, it wouldn't hurt you to be happy for someone else's success. And that was it. Not the words themselves, but the reminder that even after everything I built, they still saw me as the family disappointment, not the entrepreneur who created something from scratch, secured a major exit, or learned how to survive in a competitive space. Just the dropout, the burden, the failure. I left quietly. No scene. I drove to my old high school field, parked, and looked at the empty bleachers where I used to sit after quitting soccer. I thought about every moment that led to this. I called my old mentor. He picked up immediately. Ethan, everything okay? I hesitated. I think I want to do something petty. He laughed. Define petty. I want to invite my whole family to dinner next weekend at the most expensive restaurant in the city. I'll pay for everything, but only after they sit through a presentation. He didn't hesitate. Do it. So I did. I waited a few days, let the tension settle, then texted my mother, asking her to help invite everyone to a dinner celebrating something important. She didn't question it. She just said she was happy I was trying to reconnect. I booked a private room at the city's most upscale restaurant, the kind with gold-edged menus, valet service, and a sommelier who treats wine like a sacred ritual. I pre-ordered everything: steaks, seafood, desserts, high-end drinks. No expense spared. Everyone RSVP'd. Of course they did, assuming the night was about them. I wore a black suit and brought printed copies of something I had prepared. It wasn't a flashy presentation, just a simple one-page diagram showing our company's organizational chart before and after the acquisition. And right there, in clear print, was Nexra listed under our parent company, with my name at the top, directly under the CEO. I arrived at the restaurant early, greeted each family member as they walked in, smiled, took a few photos, and listened to Aunt Sandra talk about how Zach had been chosen for a new client assignment. Once everyone finished their appetizers, I stood up. I just wanted to say a few words, I began. But before I could continue, Zach, poor Zach, stepped forward and said, "Before you start, I just want to thank everyone for their support. This new role is a big deal for me, and I hope to make you all proud." Light applause followed. I nodded. Thanks, Zach. That actually leads into what I wanted to share. I handed out the pages, watched them read, saw their eyes widen, noticed Aunt Sandra's jaw drop, and delivered the line I had rehearsed. You're right, Zach is going places, and luckily for him, one of those places is under my supervision. Zach mumbled. Forks hit plates. Just as the room settled into silence, my grandfather stood. He didn't speak at first. He looked at me, then at the paper, then at Zach. His hand trembled slightly as he set the page down. His stare was steady, aged, but sharp. The room grew quiet, almost respectful, like we had stepped into a chapel without realizing it. He turned to Zach, who was frozen with his champagne glass half raised, and asked slowly, "You work for him?" Zach swallowed hard. His eyes darted between me, his mother, and the page. "No, I mean, not directly. He's not, like, in my department. He doesn't oversee me or anything." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The page explained everything. My name was there. VP of Talent Infrastructure and Strategic Acquisitions. Nexra was listed as one of 5 acquisitions under our branch, displayed beneath the new holding company's emblem. I had signed Zach's paycheck. Technically, he was 3 levels beneath me, 2 if you counted the dotted line structure. I had never shown it off. I'd never even messaged him on Slack. But the numbers didn't lie. I could have reviewed his performance, approved or rejected his bonus, or reassigned his team to a random internal project. Everyone in the room understood that. Grandpa chuckled and turned to Aunt Sandra. "Will, look at that. You were so busy praising the boy, you forgot to notice the man standing beside him." He looked back at me. "I always knew you had fire in you." It was the kind of nod he used to give me when I struggled building model trains in his garage. Then he sat down and cut into his steak with new enthusiasm. The rest of the room, however, wasn't ready to move on. Victoria stayed silent, staring at the page like it had betrayed her. My father shifted uncomfortably, glancing at my mother as if waiting for permission to speak. Aunt Sandra had gone pale, blinking like the ground had disappeared beneath her. And Zach, poor Zach, looked like he wished he could vanish. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't even angry anymore. That feeling had passed. I mostly felt tired. When I sat back down and took a slow sip of water, I knew this wasn't the conclusion. It was the midpoint. Let me take you back to the part of the story I skipped earlier. The part most people avoid discussing when they finally make it. The part that hurts. After leaving Victoria's graduation celebration early, I moved out of my parents' house into a tiny apartment above a laundromat with a leaking ceiling and paper-thin walls. I worked nights delivering food and spent my days building my company, writing code, assembling clumsy prototypes using tutorials and late-night forums. Only one friend, David, believed in the idea and helped on weekends for free. The first version of the platform crashed constantly. The second barely functioned. The third finally started working. We got our first paying customer 15 months ago, a small company in Ohio, $99 a month. I cried when the Stripe notification came in, not out of joy, but relief. I wasn't delusional. The night we reached $600 in revenue, I bought 2 paper crowns from Burger King and made David wear one. We toasted with Pepsi and talked like royalty. But growth was slow. Money was tighter than ever. Every dollar went to hosting bills, UX updates, and customer support. I didn't pay myself for 28 months. My parents didn't know. They thought I was lazy. My father once asked if I planned to contribute to society. I nodded and changed the subject. I skipped family events, ignored texts, and lived in that strange space, too broke to enjoy progress, too stubborn to quit. Then I hit my low point. In year 3, we lost our biggest client due to a feature issue. Churn increased. David had to leave when his mother got sick. I was alone again. I maxed out my last credit card just to keep the company running. I applied for warehouse night shifts to survive. One night, I sat in my car outside the warehouse orientation center, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, wondering why I kept forcing myself through this. Why keep suffering? Why not get a normal job and walk away? But something in me, quiet, frustrated, determined, refused. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the fear of returning to those family dinners with nothing to show. Maybe it was the memory of Victoria rolling her eyes when I mentioned my idea. Whatever it was, night. 2 weeks later, we had a call with an angel investor. Everything changed. His name was Robert. He wasn't flashy. He was practical. He believed in the concept and saw potential. He invested $50,000, enough to keep us afloat, and hire a part-time developer. From there, we grew slowly, then quickly. We signed clients. Word spread. 2 years later, a venture capital firm made an offer. We negotiated and signed. I upgraded to a real apartment. David came back. We built a real team. Then came the acquisition, $13.5 million. Clean terms, no drama. I walked away with a solid share. Not enough to retire forever, but enough to never feel cornered again. I stayed on for a new role in strategic acquisitions and internal infrastructure, helping companies like ours grow smarter and faster. Nexro was one of the first businesses I helped acquire. I didn't even realize Zach worked there until I saw his name on a personnel list. I laughed when I noticed it months later, but I didn't mention it until the reunion. Back at the restaurant, I watched my family quietly eat their meals. Too proud to talk, too uneasy to pretend nothing had happened. I gave a brief toast. "Thank you for coming." I thanked my parents for raising me, calmly. Then I paid the entire bill and left. No inflated ego, no showmanship, just peace. But peace doesn't erase history. The following week, my mother texted, "Can we talk?" I called her. She didn't apologize immediately. She asked real questions about the company and my life. I told her about the nights above the laundromat, the rice meals, the tears, the silence. She didn't say much. She just listened. I think that hurt her more than anything I could have said. She had no idea I was drowning while living under her roof. She cried. I almost did too. Victoria sent me a long, formal email, polite, apologetic. She said she admired me even if she hadn't shown it. She said she was proud. I didn't reply immediately. I wasn't upset. I just wasn't sure I believed her yet. Zach hasn't contacted me, but the rumors say he's keeping a low profile at work. Now that the news is out, people are more cautious when they learn the person they used to mock sits 3 rungs above them. Aunt Sandra has gone quiet on Facebook. No more brag posts. No more subtle boasts about Zach. Just pictures of her garden and vague comments about real success being silent. I smile whenever I see them. But here's the truth. Revenge felt great for a moment. Peace felt better. Not because they finally noticed me, but because I finally understood myself. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had spent so many years trying to prove I wasn't a failure that I forgot I never was one. And maybe the real victory wasn't that they finally knew. It was that I no longer needed them to. But the story didn't end there, because something happened after that dinner. Something I didn't expect. Something that shifted the entire family dynamic. And this time, it wasn't in my favor. It started with a voicemail. 4 weeks after that meal, I was on a flight back from Chicago, exhausted and running on 2 hours of sleep when I noticed the message. I had missed my dad's call. Message length, 1 minute and 23 seconds. We didn't talk much, even after everything. Our relationship stayed in a strange limbo, polite but distant, like 2 coworkers who used to be close but lost their rhythm. I played the message while standing at the luggage carousel. His voice was quiet, too quiet. "Hey, Ethan, listen, something's come up. Nothing urgent, don't worry, but your grandfather's been asking about you. Wants to see you. I think it's important. He's not saying much, but when he asks twice, I listen. Call me." That was it. My stomach tightened. Grandpa was still sharp, but his health wasn't what it used to be. He still lived alone, and refused to leave the house he had built himself. But recently, my mom hinted he was slowing down. I called him the next morning. "Ethan," he boomed, "you finally done playing with airplanes and meetings and all that stuff?" It made me laugh. "Just landed. What's going on?" There was a long pause. "Come over tomorrow, if you can. There's something I want to show you." His home looked exactly the same. The porch railings were still painted the same fading blue. The same old wind chimes tapped softly in the breeze. The familiar smell of coffee, cedar, and something comforting lingered on the walls and memories. He waited for me on the porch, wearing his usual suspenders and a flat cap that made him look like he stepped out of a 1950s baseball photo. "You're late," he said, even though I was 5 minutes early. "Nice to see you too," I replied. He waved me inside. He led me to his study, still cluttered with tools, old maps, stacks of yellowed newspaper clippings, and a locked cabinet that hadn't been opened in decades. He eased into his worn leather chair and motioned for me to sit. Then he unlocked the cabinet, pulled out a manila folder, and handed it to me. Inside were old documents, property deeds, tax forms, letters, and a wrinkled photo of the lakeside cottage from my childhood. I scanned the first page, confused. "I don't understand," I said. "What is this?" "That," Grandpa said slowly, "is everything the family doesn't know about." I looked up. He leaned back, resting both hands on his cane. "That lake house, it's been in the family since the 70s. Your grandmother and I bought it before your uncles ever got married. I never told anyone it was under my name only. Figured it would mean fewer arguments when I died." I looked through the titles, the signatures, and then saw my name on several documents, dated within the past year. "You transferred these to me," I said. He nodded. "Started the paperwork months ago, made it official last week." I hadn't noticed. "Why me?" He paused again, looking at me with a seriousness I wasn't used to, almost like he was trying to read straight through me. "Because you showed me something they never did. Grit, determination. You earned everything you've built. Your father, Sandra, Victoria, the others, they think success is automatic if you check the right boxes. Good grades, good schools, the right titles." He turned toward me. "But you built your path, and you showed grace. You didn't flaunt it, even when you could have." I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. He continued, softer. "They think everything's going to your dad. Sandra assumes Zach will get a portion, but I've seen how they treat people when they think they're above them. And I've seen how you stayed grounded when you didn't have to." He tapped the filing cabinet. "You're the executor now. You hold the key. And when the time comes, it's your decision what happens next." My pulse quickened. "Does anyone else know?" He grinned. "Nope. That's the fun part." I left his house, feeling like someone had handed me a loaded tool and told me to handle it carefully. I didn't ask for this. At first, I didn't even want it. But the more I thought about the lake house, the accounts, and the forgotten shares in an old family company that still produced steady income, the more I understood what I now had. Leverage. And then old memories came back, like Victoria laughing in my face when I asked her to review a contract in the early days of my business. "I'm a doctor, not a magician," she said. Or Sandra telling my mom behind my back that I was a hopeless case and that they should be ready for me to move home. Or Zach bragging at a wedding that some people assume startups are fast money because they don't understand reality. I remembered all of it, and now I finally understood the position I was in. Over the next few weeks, I began to plan, not out of anger or revenge, but because I wanted clarity, fairness, and maybe a bit of impact. First, I contacted my lawyer. He reviewed everything Grandpa had given me, confirmed the transfers, filed the quiet paperwork to finish a few deeds, created protections, and watched as legal authority shifted into my name piece by piece. Then I searched through the old business records for a company called Pinrov Utility LLC, something the family had forgotten after selling most of it in the late 2000s. But someone had kept a small share. That someone was Grandpa, and the 8% was now mine. And that 8% had a buyer waiting. $300,000. I signed the documents. Suddenly, I had cash on hand, legal ownership of 3 properties, 1 cabin, and access to a family trust they had no idea existed. The irony was staggering. The whole family thought Grandpa was forgetful and needed help managing his affairs. They were already circling, expecting that when he passed, they'd divide whatever was left. They had no idea the will had already changed. No idea I was the executor. No idea I now held the passwords to every account he ever used. I waited until Thanksgiving. This year's dinner was at Sandra's house. It was the usual gathering. Roast turkey, polite comments, and exaggerated laughs. Zach was quieter than normal. He kept his gaze lowered, occasionally glancing at me as if unsure whether he should be annoyed or impressed. Victoria talked about her new boyfriend, a surgeon. She introduced him 3 separate times, as though we hadn't heard her earlier. Sandra was fully in host mode. "This turkey is from that specialty farm near the vineyard. Nothing frozen," she said, "and we only use ceramic knives now. Better for the environment." I smiled and stayed quiet. Let them talk. Let everyone speak. When dessert arrived, I tapped my glass. "Hey everyone," I said, standing. "Can I have 5 minutes?" Chairs shifted. Even Grandpa looked up from his pumpkin pie. I set a small black folder on the table. "This," I said, "is the updated deed to the lake house." Sandra blinked. "The lake house? It's in my name now," I replied evenly. "Grandpa transferred it last month, along with a few other assets." The room changed. Victoria frowned. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder, revealing the notarized document, and turned it toward them. Sandra stiffened. "That has to be a mistake. That property belongs to the family, belongs to us." Grandpa cleared his throat. "I am the family," he said, "and I made my choice." I waited before speaking again. "I'm not doing anything with it yet, but I will be reorganizing a few things. So, if anyone planned to use the house next summer without approval, you may want to reconsider." Victoria's boyfriend began muttering excuses. Zach looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. Sandra shot to her feet. "This is absurd. You manipulated him. You pressured an old man into signing away our family property." "No," Grandpa replied calmly. "I gave it to the person who earned it, and I also made him executor. When I'm gone, Ethan has final authority." The silence that followed wasn't the usual dinner pause. It was heavier and final. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't just about property. It was about honesty, and it was time for all of it to be addressed. I placed another envelope on the table, Sandra's name printed on the front. Something she had forgotten, something she assumed would stay buried. As she opened it, her entire expression changed. The unraveling began. Sandra's fingers trembled as she slid out the document. She opened it slowly, as if she suspected it contained something damaging. Her eyes moved across the lines, speeding up. By the time she reached the signature, her face had gone pale, unreadable, but revealing everything anyway. I said nothing. I wanted her to speak first. "Where did you get this?" she finally asked, gripping the paper too tightly. "It was in one of Grandpa's old files," I said calmly, "with the rest of the trust documents." "You went through his private things," she snapped, her voice rising. "You manipulated him. You must have. He'd never give you this. You've always hated me." "Stop," Grandpa said, quiet but firm. "He didn't manipulate anything. I gave it to him." The room went still again, but now the quiet felt like something ready to break. Victoria leaned in. "What is it?" "A promissory note," I explained, "signed by Aunt Sandra 25 years ago for a $40,000 loan Grandpa gave her and Uncle Ron when they tried to start that landscaping business that failed in a year." Sandra's voice wavered. "He said it was a gift. We were family. He told us not to worry." Grandpa shook his head. "I told you not to worry yet. I never forgave that debt. I waited to see if you'd bring it up. You didn't." Sandra stared at the page, shaken. "That was decades ago. It doesn't matter now. Any lawyer would say the statute of—" "It's not about suing you," I said, folding my hands. "It's about fairness. For years, you treated everyone like they were beneath you. You talked about your money, criticized people's careers, mocked choices you didn't agree with, my parents and me. And the whole time, you ignored the help you received to get started." Victoria spoke quietly. "Okay, but that was a long time ago. Why bring this up now?" "Because," I said, looking around the table, "this family has rewarded arrogance and dismissed humility for years. I was treated like a failure because I didn't follow your expected path. You mocked me when I struggled. You ignored me unless I was useful for gossip. And now," I paused, "now I'm the one holding the keys to the property, the accounts, and this family's legacy." Sandra glared. "You're doing this for revenge. You were always jealous of Zach and Victoria." I tilted my head. "You keep using the word jealous, but what do you think I'm jealous of?" No one answered. "Victoria earned her success," I said. "I respect that. Even when she's distant, she works hard." Victoria stiffened, but didn't object. "As for Zach, I was never jealous, but you made sure people thought I should be. At every event, he was the example, and I was the warning. You shaped that story until it became reality. Well, things changed." Grandpa chuckled softly. I turned back to Sandra. "You owe $40,000. I don't need the money, but I want a written acknowledgement signed, stating the loan, the terms, and that you misrepresented it as a gift." She scoffed. "You're not serious." I slid another page toward her. "I drafted it already." "You can't force me to sign." "No," I said. "But if you don't, I'll include it in Grandpa's estate records. Under the updated trust rules, failing to acknowledge a debt means I can legally exclude you from inheritance distribution." Sandra tried to reply, but no words came out. Zach watched like he was witnessing a slow collision. Victoria didn't look angry anymore, just thoughtful. I addressed everyone. "This isn't punishment, it's responsibility. For years I was labeled the problem. I was left out of events, dismissed at gatherings, and judged for not fitting your timeline. Now that I'm successful, I'm not going to pretend it never happened." I took a breath. "So here's how things move forward." I made eye contact with each of them. 1. If you want access to the lake house, you go through me. 2. I will update the family trust. Access to funds will be based on contribution and transparency. 3. No more side agreements. I will implement quarterly reports for any shared assets. I turned to Victoria. "You understand systems. If you want to help manage this as co-executor, I'd appreciate it. Not as a favor, but as accountability. She nodded. I can do that. 4. Zach. He looked up quickly. You don't owe me loyalty, but we work in the same field now. If you want guidance on your role or your growth, I'm open to it. But I won't shield you. If you slack off, you'll be fired like anyone else. Earn it. He nodded slowly, appreciative. And 5, I said to Sandra. You have until the weekend to sign the letter. If not, your name is removed from the list. She sat down without a word. The consequences came gradually. Within weeks, the apology messages started. Victoria, my mother, cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. Suddenly, everyone was curious about my life and what I had been through. I responded respectfully, but not overly warm. Some bridges don't need repair. Zach began showing up earlier. I noticed his effort. He asked better questions. He was trying in his own way, which I respected. A month later, Victoria invited me to a hospital benefit where she gave a speech. I attended. She introduced me as my smart brother who built something from nothing when no one believed in him. It wasn't an act. It was sincere. We talked afterward, more about the future than the past. We weren't suddenly close, but we were finally aligned. Sandra eventually signed the letter, but she never reached out again. That was fine. She no longer controlled the narrative. As for me, I kept running my division, investing in small companies, living in the same apartment, and driving the same Tesla. But I restored the lake house. I spent weekends there, alone or with people who mattered. I built a fire pit, added a dock, planted trees. It became peaceful. No tension, no comparisons. Just the water and the fire. It was never about money. It was about knowing who you are when the support disappears and recognizing who others become when the applause ends. That is the real inheritance. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories.